I have all my life been obsessed with mortality. It's just like this thing I bear with me all the time.
Back in the 1980s and 90s, Philadelphia's Moore Gallery had some of the best artists around. One of them was a guy whose figure paintings were very serious and intense. He now lives in Jamaica Plain outside of Boston, and I tracked him down by phone. He's a lot more upbeat than his paintings might suggest.
What's your name, young man?
Anthony Apesos.
Sounds great.
It is Greek.
Tony grew up in Philadelphia, went to PAFA, and eventually moved to Boston for a job as an art professor and administrator. He and his family live next to Harvard's Arnold Arboretum. Tony has a terrific virtual show of landscape paintings he made of the Arboretum. But before we look at them, let's learn a bit more about his figure paintings. I asked him how he came up with these strange narrative images.
The way I design a painting, I usually just make a lot of sketches and make up figure compositions. It was like automatic drawing. I wasn't planning. I didn't say, I'm going to illustrate a story. I would just put figures together and see what developed. I would then use models to realize them. I have ideas about what the stories are, but I'm not committed to them. I've had people tell me what my paintings are about, and I'll sometimes think their idea is better than mine. To me, the painting is an opportunity for interpretation. But I also have done paintings that really do illustrate text. One of the major series of that kind was inspired by Virgil's Aeneid. Tell the story in modern-day dress. Most people would not recognize what the text is. I did remember showing them once to an English professor. Can you guess what this is? And he did. But I think most people wouldn't. And it doesn't particularly matter that much to me.
Before going to PAFA and then to Bard for his MFA, Tony graduated with a degree in religion from Vassar. He is both an artist and an author, having written art reviews as well as pieces of a more scholarly nature. And he has definite opinions about what separates the artistic wheat from the chaff.
There are two notions of painting that I really don't like. Hilton Kramer called one of them eyeball realism, just depicting what you see. And the other extreme is purely formalist. It's just as empty. And I've always been interested in content. I've always wanted my paintings to evoke something. I don't always know what they evoke. You're not just looking at the painting, you're looking through into something else entirely.
There was one group of paintings on Tony's website that totally surprised me, but I suppose maybe they shouldn't have.
Dinosaurs, they've been dead a very long time. And the concept of being dead that long, we today look at them and we're looking into the deepest time. The people in the spaces were having this encounter with them. Sometimes they would just be reading a label. Sometimes they look almost traumatized.
Tony made these images after visiting the Dinosaur Hall at Chicago's Field Museum.
And I was just blown away by the way that the bones were illuminated, really dramatically. Lots of strong spotlights. And I started taking pictures for an opportunity to paint bones as interiors of museums.
It turns out that these dinosaur paintings impacted the way he painted some of his landscapes.
How do you put the sun in a painting? It's too bright. But I learned how to do that, I think, by painting the spotlights shining on the dinosaurs.
It was not love at first sight between Tony and his new neighbor, the Arnold Arboretum.
When I first moved here, I wasn't inspired by that landscape. It's a great collection of trees, but the landscaping is more about the trees. I was used to the Morris Arboretum in Philadelphia, which is so picturesque. And this is not like that. It's much wilder, less manicured. It's designed by Friedrich Olmsted, so it has that Olmsted look, a much more natural look. It wasn't the kind of landscape I usually painted, but you learn to love a place. And a couple things happened. I got a dog, and the dog took me out to the landscape. I had to walk her.
Was the dog, by the way, a beagle?
Yes, it was. Cookie. She's now across the Rainbow Bridge, I think. Have you ever seen that? But anyway, going to the Arboretum all the time was one thing that changed things. Another thing is having a daughter. There are two things I wanted to do as a father, activities I could share with her. One was gardening, and that also brought me closer to dealing with land. And then the other thing was to learn wildflowers. But those things, having the dog taking me there, having a daughter that made me start to pay more attention to the landscape, and then proximity made me more and more interested in the landscape. And the thing about the Arboretum is it's not terribly picturesque. It's beautiful. Every time I go to it, it's different. It changes not only by season, but in the course of a day, depending on the weather. It became this resource that was so various. And the more you paint something, the more you see there. And once I started painting it, all I see is things I want to paint.
I love these paintings. They bring to my mind the painters of the sublime, like Caspar David Friedrich.
One of the things I love about Friedrich is his symmetry. He has so much symmetry in his paintings. I think it's a way of turning the landscape into something holy. The landscape is an altarpiece. The way you approach an altar is symmetrically. You go up to it, you face where communion happens. When you face it, it's like meeting you. It's like an encounter. It's almost a portraiture of landscape painting rather than about space. It's more about the things in the space.
Tony told me that he almost always used landscape as a backdrop for his figure paintings. Eventually, the people got smaller and smaller until only the background remained.
I just find them so moving in an odd way. They have this melancholic beauty about them.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it feels like a good and peaceful place to die.
I have a funny story for you about the depressing aspect of my painting. I was showing it more, kind of strapped for money. I went to Chuck and said, Chuck, I want to do some paintings that we can sell. I'm willing to be a whore. Just tell me, what do you think would sell? He didn't seem to have much confidence I was going to really be able to do that. But anyway, he said, local scenes people recognize. Not very big. No people. So I did a group like this, and I took them into the gallery, and they were propped up against the wall along the floor. Frank Galuska showed up. Frank is a painter I respect, and I was embarrassed. I was prostituting myself with these pot boilers. So rather than hide them, I just said, well, Frank, what do you think? So I decided to do some commercial paintings. Unlike my other work, stuff that people would want to buy. He said, Tony, these are just like all your work. I said, well, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Like, look at this painting. It's Rittenhouse Square. And it was the back of a fountain that looked like this big monolith. And he said, look at that. It looks like a tomb. I said, yeah, but there are flowers around it. And he said, that makes it worse. So...
You may not be able to escape your temperament, but perhaps you can transcend it. Tony has painted his feelings about mortality for half a century. These emotions are distilled in his landscapes, strange and sometimes fearsome images.
exhibitions were essential for making me reconsider what landscape painting could be. One was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it was the Samuel Palmer show. I remember being in that show for hours and being forced to leave and feeling like I was being expelled from paradise. His vision of the landscape was so loving, so detailed, suffused with a love of place and tender regard for earth and sky. The other exhibition was the great John Constable show at the National Gallery in Washington. Every one of his major 6-foot paintings, particularly his great painting of Salisbury Cathedral. I don't know any other landscape painting that combines so much richness of detail, such rich paint handling, such unity of lighting and color, and such powerful mood. For me, it's undoubtedly the greatest landscape painting. And together, these two shows made me realize that landscape painting could be an opportunity for really deep personal expression. Monet declared that he was indifferent to his subject matter, and I feel that indifference is why I'm so indifferent to the work of Impressionism. And it's perhaps the coldness which makes what I call his Technicolor scabs so popular with the general public. There's very little there to challenge you, very little to think about. They're just pretty. You can't say that about Constable or Palmer. They're richer. They're deeper. I have all my life been obsessed with mortality. It's just like this thing I bear with me all the time. I surprise people with how productive I am, that I've managed to write and paint, and I'm always have a new project going. And it's because I don't have much time.
Well, Tony, I, for one, sure look forward to seeing the art you make in whatever days remain before you and Cookie reunite across the Rainbow Bridge.